Welcome everyone to this early morning Meet the Author session. My name is Kerry Dingle and I'm the director of the education charity WORLDwrite, and I'm here with 30 volunteers who are our film crew. You'll see them around. So quick shout out to the crew. Thank you guys. And we are really delighted to have as our super guest luminary author, Dr. Az Hakeem, who we call Dr. Az, who's going to provide us with a mini lecture on this book, which I'd highly recommend. I've got a chapter left to go, but it is gripping. It's harrowing, but it is really gripping and engaging. Detrans, when transition is not the solution. And Dr. Az, is a consultant psychiatrist and has been the UK's leading specialist in adult gender identity psychotherapy since 2000 and is honorary associate clinical professor at University College London Medical School. He's the author of Trans, as well as more recently his new book, which he will be signing at the bookstore after this session. His new book, Detrans, Where Transition is Not the Solution, which he's going to introduce to us today, or some of those themes. Dr. Az's mini lecture will be followed by comments from our two respondents, who are also luminaries in their own right. Firstly, Richie Herron. And Richie is a writer, activist, and advocate, and he made the headlines in 2022 announcing his legal action against the NHS for an invasive and life-altering procedure, and has since been an important and impactful voice in conversations which he says lack nuance and empathy. Our second respondent is Jennifer Lahl, who's come all the way from the States to be with us today and has got to rush back to California straight after. And Jennifer is the founder of the Center for Bioethics and Culture and program director of Genspect USA. I have to say, I haven't got time to go through them, and they've all got really impressive biographies you can read on the Battle of Ideas website, and I'm sure you can Google them for lots more. But she has written and directed an impressive slate of award-winning documentaries. So film crew, we need to look at those. And her new book, co-authored with, is it Callie Fell, is the Detransition Diaries. So Dr. Az is going to speak for 8 to 10 minutes, and I'm going to wave cards if we need to, because we really do have to keep to time in this very short 45-minute session. And then Richie, followed by Jennifer, will give us their comments for 3 to 4 minutes each, and then we'll come out to all of our wonderful attendees in the audience. And I must just say it's great to have a session where an issue like detransitioning can be discussed civilly and with compassion and openness, and not silenced or hidden as it often is. And I think for me that's the beauty of the Battle of Ideas Festival, that we can have these discussions and reflect on Richie's point, the lack of nuance and empathy, and show some ourselves. Okay, Dr. Az.
Thank you very much. I love having a microphone. So, I'm Az. So when I was 18, I had to make the decision whether to do fine art or medicine. I got into both, and I decided the day before to do medicine, much to my parents' relief. But coming from an arts background, I always thought that sex change operations were fascinating. I mean, this must be the ultimate sculpture. But I was always more interested in minds than bodies. And my first job it was in plastic surgery. I helped do the sex change operations. I thought, okay, what's happening in their heads? No one's changing their heads. And I went to psychiatry and I was thinking about it. Then I went to the Portman Clinic, where I trained and worked in forensic psychotherapy. And that was where I developed the specialist UK-wide NHS, the only one that's ever been, and there hasn't been one since, adult gender dysphoria psychotherapy service. So anybody could come for therapy. I did individual and group therapy, and I learnt loads from doing it for the 12 years that I was running it. Sorry, yes? Is that better? Yeah. So what I found was that even though everyone was coming with gender dysphoria, they were different, and you could clump them into groups. So there was the people who used to be called transsexual, and these were people who wanted to permanently change their bodies, who believed that they should be the opposite sex. That was about 25% of the patients. And then there were about 26% of the patients were people who had a sex change and then regretted it, and they may or may not have detransitioned, but they were post-operative regretters. And then there was a huge amount of transvestites. Nobody talks about transvestites anymore, but there's always been far more transvestites than transsexuals. And they're people who don't want to change sex. They just want to temporarily reside in the vestiges of the opposite sex, either because they get excited or because they get sexually excited. So there were fetishist or non-fetishist transvestites. And then there was the autogynephiles, AGP, which often gender critical people confuse for transvestites, but they're men who get sexually excited by the fantasy of having a vagina and breasts. And there was a very small number, about 5%. And whilst I was there, I also spent a couple of days a week in the TAVI GID service. And my role there was mainly to be a heckler and a troublemaker, because what I saw was camp boys and tomboys coming in and being trans. And I said to the director at the time, isn't what you're doing mad? Because these kids these are 4 or 5 year olds. Aren't they just going to end up being gay boys and lesbians, or just neither? And his response was, would it be any more mad than them being gay? And this came from the Tavistock, where homosexuality was considered an inversion, it was pathological. I went through 2 terms of teaching when I trained there on the pathology of homosexuality. Anyway, that's the background to the clinic. The Portman Clinic was very gender critical, and they were happy for me to set up these groups. What I found was that in the transsexual subgroup, there was almost 100% autism, and or trauma, and or internalized homophobia. And the thing about autism is it gives you a very black and white, rigid framework. You're very rules-based. And their idea of what it meant to be a male or female was very, very rules-based. So you can divide people into the gender confident, who do what they like with their appearance, and they say, well, if I don't fit in your framework's rubbish. Or the gender underconfident, the autistic person who says, I need to be like this, and this, and if I'm not, I must be other. And they're not able to be subversive or creative. And what I found was that the degree of autism also correlated with how likely they were or not to regret it. Because what I found was they'd be presenting with this initial sense of inauthenticity for their own sex. They didn't feel they were doing it right. They didn't like rugby, they didn't like football, they didn't like getting to fights, or, all these caricature things. And then there was the autistic mindset, which realized they were a bit different, probably because they were a bit geeky, or, they didn't quite get on and communicate like other people. And they realized there was something different about them. Then they searched for a meaning as to why they were different. And then for some reason or other, these particular people latched onto the idea that maybe they're the wrong sex. And then, a bit like me on a maths A level, they came to this conclusion which made sense to them, but that was incorrect. And they latched onto it. And the thing about the autistic mind is that when they're certain of something, they're certain of it. And if you don't agree with them, then you hate them. And I know what I know, this is what I need to do. And they pursue that. And so there's a sense of inauthenticity about themselves. Then there's this fantasized, idealized solution of the trans self. And then there's the sex change. Then there's a period of transgender euphoria. And then, depending on the degree of autism, there was then a realization that it wasn't everything they made out to be. So the ones who are really autistic didn't get that problem, because they were thinking, well, no, I've got long hair and a dress and the makeup, everyone knows I'm a woman. But the ones who weren't that autistic had the realization that maybe people aren't seeing me as a woman, or vice versa. And that would lead to the transgender dysphoria and the sense of inauthenticity of themselves again. So it was a circle. I did both individual and group therapy, because I was trained in individual psychoanalytic psychotherapy, and I'm a group analyst. And what I found is that the group setting was far superior. In the one-to-one setting, the very dyadic, black and white, male, female, yes you are, no you're not, was the case. Whereas in the group, where everybody in the group was either a transsexual, a transvestite, an autogynephile, or a regretter or detransitioner, the analysis was by the patients. So in group analysis, it's analysis of the group by the group, including the individual, including the conductor. So it wasn't just smarty pants me saying this, that, and the other. It was each other. So they would say, "Hang on, you sound just like me, but you sound completely mad," and that was fine coming from them. And the post-operative regretter or the detransition would say, "Look, you sounded just like I sounded 10 years ago." So they were able to do it that way, and it was wonderful. And they could stay in the group as long as they wanted. I saw some people every week for 10 years. That's how well I knew them. They tended to get better after about a year, but they just like being in the group. What I found is that less than 2% of my patients went on for any physical, hormonal, or surgical things. Less than 2%. Because once they'd realized that this solution they had wasn't really a solution, but it was a proxy solution for something else underlying which they were escaping from, and once they dealt with that, then everything was okay. Remember to flash the cards at me if I'm going on too long.
Yeah.
2 minutes, okay, fine. What time do you do this? So there's a definite link with autism, trauma, internalized homophobia. Like I said, I'm the only psychiatrist in psychotherapy who offered this for gender dysphoria. It doesn't exist at the moment. I think that's what people need. All my regretters said, when they regretted it, they went back to their employers, their family, their friends, and they said, "Why didn't you just say what on earth you're thinking about when I came out?" And they all said, "Because we're being supportive, because that's what we're meant to do." And they said, "Well, I wish they hadn't been supportive. Why could they said, "We wish we'd had a group like this," because the group was challenging. It wasn't confrontational, it was challenging. So when someone said, "Oh, I feel like a woman," the group would say, "What does that feel like?" That's not a feeling state. Feelings are happy, sad, irritated, angry. There's no feeling of being a woman. So the problem is when people say that they are the wrong sex, absolutely nobody says, "How do you know? How do you get there?" And my therapy was just basically trying to get them to show you that they're working through as to how they got there. Because in the hundreds of patients I saw over the years, not a single patient was able to accurately convince me or anyone else as to what it was to be a man or woman. They would only ever describe external characteristics, like I like long hair, I like the dresses, I like cooking, I'm emotional, I like playing with boys. It was always nonsense. So I actually think there's no such thing as trans. I think it's a proxy solution for something else, and I think the medical profession has invented something but I treated adults. So with adults, I thought, well, they can do what they want. They're adults. All I want to do is help you think. I don't want to convince you to do something or not to do something. You can do what you want. I just want you to think. You can do whatever you want. Just think about it first. And so if I was there trying to convince them not to do something, it wouldn't be helpful. It had to be neutral. That's why I can't imagine working with kids, because I would know in my head that I really would want to do that. But with adults, I thought, well, as long as you spend time thinking about it, then decide, but they invariably didn't. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Az. That was really illuminating. Richie, your thoughts?
Thank you, Dr. Az.
Thank you.
No,
I forgot to mention that.
It's all right.
So Richie's got a chapter in the book.
That's really thank you. And thank you to the Battle of Ideas for inviting me down. And Jennifer.
Just push it a bit.
Sorry, there we go. This is about what I won't do that again. I'm going to pack in as much as I can for the short time, and I promise it won't be that long. I just want to give some context of what I'm doing. So, as in the introduction, just over 2.5 years ago, I began speaking publicly about my experience with transition, and I had a very simple message. I regret this. I shouldn't have done this. I gave a frank and at times highly critical view of transition and the surgical procedures which are sold as life-saving. But let me tell you, they are not life-saving. They are life-ruining, life-shortening, This isn't just my hard-earned opinion, it's a fact. Surgery increases suicidality, and the physical issues it creates either immediately or over the course of the years are devastating. And let's be clear what I mean by surgery. I'll be explicit as the realities are hidden in the language. My testicles were removed, my penis was flayed, muscles and nerves were removed, the erectile tissue was mostly removed, but they can't get it all. My urethra was shortened and reorientated, and the remains of what was my genitals was sewn inside out in a cavity created by my surgeon. He used his fingers to set the wound, which would then be filled with bandaging. I can still feel the indentations of his 2 fingers within now. But sure, say bottom surgery if you want, or GRS. After all is said and done, doctors won't touch you. The ones who want to help don't know how to help, or what to do. They have no idea what's going on inside. It's alien to them. I don't blame them for not touching me. What a mess this is. It was a stupid thing to do, and I'll never forgive myself for that. But this opinion is unwelcome in a movement that claims to be all-inclusive. It wasn't allowed in transition, not from the professionals, not from the conditional love of the community. In fact, when I told my therapist at the gender clinic that I regretted surgery, I was told I didn't regret it. I was told it was part of my OCD, that I now had an unstable personality disorder. You must never speak ill of affirmation. It is sacrosanct to the entire movement. Going public has been a double-edged sword. One, it allowed me to make sense of what happened, but also allowed me to help others in my position. However, aside from a precious few, this wasn't a welcome perspective. I was told of my sinister motives, that I want to ban and restrict trans people, that I was a right-wing agent of some lobbying group or even a foreign government. I was assured that the regret rates were far higher for knee surgery, and there was no panic there, so why for this? Well, let me tell you, if you believe that the regret rates are below 1%, you have been hoodwinked. It has a 1 in 32 chance of complete necrosis, 1 in 6 chance of complete nerve damage, i.e. no sensation, a high chance of incontinence, bleeding, pain, and of course, the despair. I was told as I was less than 1% that our small numbers didn't matter in the grand scale of gender care, were collateral damage, nothing more. So we turn alcohol, drugs, and many others self-destruct. To quote one of my critics, detransitioners are a self-correcting problem. Fuck you, by the way. I will not be robbed of one of the things I have left, my opinion. It's mine and you cannot have it. I still regret surgery. None of what I said will ever change that fact, as uncomfortable it may be for some others. And there is a growing number of people who feel the same, and those people are facing difficult choices. Be honest and lose your friends, maybe even your livelihood, or stay silent and bury your principles with your regret. Take responsibility, which I think means confess my stupidity and take all the blame in silence. But whatever you do, do not blame the surgeon who held the scalpel. Do not blame the psychiatrists who signed the assessment. And do not blame the crowd that cheered you along. And never ever speak about it. To that, I say once more, get fucked, and thank you.
I think you're very deserving of that ovation, Richie. Thank you very much for that. Jennifer.
Can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. So I had the privilege of meeting Oz and Richie when we produced the film The Lost Boys Searching for Manhood, which I hope you all will watch. It's free on YouTube, so I'm not selling anything. And before that, we released the film called The Detransition Diaries, Saving Our Sisters. One film, The Detransition Diaries, looked at just young women, and The Lost Boys, of course, looked at young men who thought they were all born in the wrong body, and this was the solution. It is the battle of ideas, so I might say that I don't support medical or surgical transition of adults either, because I don't think it's proper medicine. It's strange to think that that might be a controversial statement. I was a pediatric nurse for about 20 years, so back in the olden days, we would never have thought that this is anything that we should be doing to children or young adults. Just some themes. When we were producing the Detransition Diaries and the Lost Boys, there's a lot of similarities. Dr. Hakeem talked about the trauma, the autism, internalized homophobia. Those were clearly seen as themes in young women as well as young boys. The role of social media and is prevalent with boys, men, and women as well. Social contagion in the United States, actually young boys are now being affected by the social contagion theory, which used to be more prevalent in young girls because girls tend to be more relational. They want to do whatever their girlfriends are doing. They want to wear their hair the way their girlfriends are wearing their hair or whatever. So everybody's got to do the same thing. But we're seeing that now increasing in young boys in the United States. What really hit me when I was producing The Lost Boys was the role of puberty. Now, girls go through puberty, boys go through puberty as well. But as a woman, I never went through male puberty. But the themes was, sort of the forcefulness. One day you're a quirky little awkward little boy, and the next day you have these raging hormones that you're like, what the hell happened to me here? And the role of shame. Not that girls don't have shame, but the role of shame in young boys for thoughts and feelings. And then also messages. Young boys live in the world where it's toxic masculinity, rape culture, boys are bad, they're perverts, they're creeps, you don't want to trust them. I love in The Lost Boys when Graham Linehan says things like, boys are afraid to laugh at the things the boys naturally find funny. They don't want to, they are afraid of saying things because they might be seen as a creep when they just want to say what they're thinking about. So I think that was, something that we have to keep in mind when we're working with or are dealing with young boys or young girls. And for me, the proxy solution that should be offered is good mental health. Let's deal with the trauma. Let's deal with the autism. Let's deal with the issues of sexual abuse, the role that pornography plays. Let's get our kids off social media. Our young adults spend hours and hours and hours on social media, which is just a rat hole, a cesspool. And I live in the state of California. California is a sanctuary state for transgender youth, which means if you live in, say, Texas or a more conservative state that doesn't allow the sexual transitioning of women and young boys, girls and boys, you can come to my state and taxpayers will fund for a young minor's gender affirmation only care. And in California, parents can lose their own children if they don't affirm their children. So the CAS report is not being talked about in America, and I'm kind of jealous of you guys here in the United Kingdom who are way ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you.